Productivity has become this modern obsession. Color-coded calendars, caffeinated morning routines, Notion templates that look like cockpit dashboards. But the truth is, most of human history didn't even care about productivity at all. At least, not the way that we do today. For 99% of our existence, productivity meant one thing: stay alive. You hunted, you built shelter, you grew food. If the sun went down and you weren't dead, fantastic, you had a productive day. Then the late 1700s hit, and the world changed faster than anyone could process. The Industrial Revolution wasn't a gentle shift, it was a sledgehammer to society. People went from working with their hands to machinery louder than jet engines. Life on a farm was repetitive, sure, but it was predictable. Industrial life? Imagine being surrounded by gears, pistons, belts, steam, and factory owners who cared more about output than oxygen. Before the Industrial Revolution, most people worked at home or in tiny workshops. A shoemaker didn't need KPIs. A weaver didn't need performance reviews. They just made things. But factories flipped that world upside down. Suddenly, thousands of people were shoved into enormous buildings, all doing tiny, repetitive tasks, so machines could take over the real work. Britain's cotton production increased tenfold between 1770 and 1850, not because humans suddenly got smarter, but because machines did the lifting. Work became about speed, consistency, and survival. And the darker truth? Productivity skyrocketed because labor was cheaper. In 1819, Parliament reported that children as young as 5 were working 12-hour shifts. Imagine being 5 and your job is to avoid being crushed by a machine that doesn't take bathroom breaks. That's the origin story of productivity. Welcome to the series where with every video we try to get you at least 1% smarter. Let's go. Okay, so around this time, society discovered something dangerous. Once you can measure productivity, you can demand productivity. This is where output logs, timesheets, and performance tracking were born. Factories tracked operations per hour, output per shift, machine uptime, and labor cost per unit. Yeah, if that makes you gag, you're not the only one. Essentially, if it moved, they measured it. And if they could measure it, it means they could optimize it. And once optimization became available, the race to squeeze out more work out of fewer people began. By the early 1900s, management science had arrived, and it had a face: Frederick Winslow Taylor. Taylor believed there was always one perfect way to do every job. Not a good way, the perfect way. He'd literally stand over workers with a stopwatch counting the seconds it took them to shovel coal, carry iron bars, or even walk from one end of the factory to the other. Then he'll tell them the best advice you could ever hear from someone: do it faster. Taylorism wasn't about empowering workers, it was about turning humans into predictable, replaceable components. But the uncomfortable truth is, it worked. When Taylor applied his methods to Bethlehem Street's pig iron handlers, output reportedly tripled. Henry Ford took it even further. Ford's assembly line, launched in 1913, cut the time to build a Model T from 12 hours to just 90 minutes. That wasn't productivity, this was a cheat code, a revolution. But as factories became more efficient, something else happened. The type of work shifted. Machines handled the physical labor. Humans moved into roles that required organizing, planning, calculating, recording, scheduling, selling, and thinking. And so began the rise of the office. If factories defined the 1800s, offices defined the 1900s. At first, offices were those grand rooms with wooden desks, towering cabinets, smoke-filled air, and paper everywhere. Productivity meant filing things quickly, typing fast, or managing endless streams of paperwork. Office workers were called knowledge workers, even those spent most of their time sorting through documents or just copying things from one page to another. But as businesses grew, offices needed a way to scale productivity the same way factories did. Enter the open plan offices. A giant room with rows of desks where managers could stand on a platform and scan the entire workforce like an army general. It was efficient, sure, but it was also soul-draining. By the 1980s, productivity became a religion. Time management books sold millions. People carried day planners, then Palm Pilots, then Blackberries. Work was no longer a job, it was an identity. Companies introduced performance reviews, quarterly goals, KPIs, stretch targets, and corporate jargon so bad that it could tranquilize a horse. And then, internet arrived, and it turned productivity into chaos. Email replaced memos, search engines replaced librarians, digital files replaced warehouses. Everything became faster, and because it became faster, companies expected more. The internet didn't make work easier, it made it endless. Meetings moved online, collaboration tools exploded, urgent became the default setting. Attention spans collapsed, productivity went up, but so did burnout. People weren't working more efficiently, they were drowning more quicker. And then everything broke. COVID happened. COVID didn't just disrupt work, it exposed the biggest lie in corporate history, the idea that productivity requires an office. Overnight, millions of workers unplugged their monitors, grabbed their plants, and then set up makeshift workstations on their kitchen counters. Companies predicted chaos, economists predicted collapse, managers predicted people would spend their days watching Netflix and pretending their Wi-Fi was lagging. Instead, productivity went up. Stanford's 2020 study found that remote workers were 13% more productive. Fewer distractions, quieter environments, fewer pointless conversations about someone's weekend plans, and zero commuting. People suddenly had hours of their day back. For many, it was the most productive they had ever been. But managers, they panicked because this removed their favorite management tool, visibility. If they couldn't see you, how could they know you were working? Instead of trusting output, companies doubled down on surveillance. Daily check-ins, Slack messages at odd hours, time tracking software that flagged idle time after 45 seconds of not moving your mouse, and Zoom calls that absolutely could have been emails. Productivity soared, but so did micromanagement. And yet, there's no denying the result. Remote work shattered the old belief that productivity was tied to a workplace. It wasn't about being in a cubicle. It was about having an environment where you could actually think. For many workers, the office was just one big distraction. The truth became obvious. Productivity isn't a building, it's a setup. It's autonomy. It's focus. It's being able to control your environment without being sucked into someone else's. And once companies finally admitted this, productivity went into a new realm, one that had no rulebook. And it's the biggest buzzword of 2025. AI. So we're not going to talk about AI like it's some sort of Marvel superhero. Instead, we're going to talk about it like what it actually is. The next evolution in a 250-year-old chain reaction. Because when you zoom out, AI isn't some magical disruption. It's the logical endpoint of a long obsession with working faster, better, and with fewer human hands involved. The Industrial Revolution replaced muscle. The Office Revolution replaced manual paperwork. The Internet replaced physical communication. Remote work replaced location. AI replaces inefficiency. AI is simply a new tool that optimized human productivity. Where factories use machines to increase output and offices use computers to increase processing speed, AI increases something far more valuable: mental leverage. To understand this properly, we have to look at every era that redefined the definition of productive. In the industrial era, being productive meant producing more units per hour. Factories cared about quantity, not quality. If you made 200 bolts, you were productive. Whether those bolts were terrible was someone else's problem. In the early office era, productivity meant paperwork, filing, typing, organizing, communicating. Success came from volume. The more files processed, the more productive you were. This is where companies started fetishizing being busy. If you looked busy, people assumed you were more valuable. By the 1980s, productivity became about speed. Early computers slashed admin time in half. Suddenly the employee could type fastest or use spreadsheets became the office MVP. By the 2000s, productivity became about connectivity. Email, project management tools, cloud storage. These didn't necessarily make people smarter, but they did make people reachable. Productivity became less about output and more about responsiveness. If you replied quickly, you were seen as competent, never mind what you actually achieved. And finally, then came remote work and productivity shifted again. This time toward autonomy. People discovered that without office distractions, they could get a full day's work done in 4 hours. Some businesses hated this revaluation. Some embraced it, but it proved something massive. When people control their environment, productivity becomes deeper, not faster. Which brings us back to AI, but framed the right way. AI isn't here to replace humans. It's here to replace the work that shouldn't have been done by humans to begin with. Endless emails, summarizing documents, transcribing meetings, scheduling, formatting, generating first drafts, sifting through data. These aren't skills. They're leftover inefficiencies from earlier eras. But this isn't unprecedented. It's the same pattern we've seen for centuries. People thought machines would replace workers in the 1800s. They did replace some, but they created millions of new jobs too. People thought computers would replace office workers in the 1980s. Instead, computers created entire industries. Every productivity leap starts with fear, transitions through denial, and then stops with people wondering how did they ever live without it? The same will happen here, because productivity isn't about tools. It's about how people will adapt to those tools. Every era produced winners, and it wasn't the hardest workers. It was the quickest adapters. The people who sought new tools and said, okay, how do I get ahead while everyone else is still complaining? The Industrial Revolution rewarded those who learned machinery. The Office Revolution rewarded those who embraced calculators and typewriters. The Digital Revolution rewarded those who mastered computers and email. And the current era, this AI-enhanced era, will reward people on doing the right work, not the most work. Because one of the biggest takeaways in this productivity revolution was always this: the limiting factor has never been the tool. It's always been the human using the tool. And we're finally reaching part of the story where humans stop competing with the tool, but instead directing them. Because this isn't the first time in history where technology doesn't extend your strength, your reach, your workflow, or your communication. It extends your capacity to think. For the first time, productivity isn't about pushing harder. It's about thinking smarter, acting smarter, and combining your skills with the right tools to get more done in less time, with less effort and less mental clutter. Productivity isn't a destination, it's an evolution. Each breakthrough makes the next evolution possible. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the moment that we think that we've hit our limit of something, the next evolution begins. Look at how each era reshaped society itself. The Industrial Revolution moved populations from farms to cities. The Office Revolution created the middle class and the 9-to-5 routine. The internet reshaped communication, attention, and globalization. Remote work reshaped where people live, how they work, and how they define work-life balance. And the current era is reshaping something deeper: how we value human ability. And that's the final twist in the entire story. The history of productivity has never been about working harder. It's been about what humans should be doing with their time. So the real question isn't, how can I work harder? It's, what can I do now that I couldn't have done before? Because that's where we are now. Not at the end of productivity's story, but at the beginning of its most human chapter. So, if this video made you 1% smarter today and inspired you to be more productive with your time, give us a like and subscribe, and make sure to tune into our next video. Until next time, peace.